One thing stood out today. Take a look at the Chancellor, as the Conservative leader pointed out. All this the night after a spectacular U-turn on benefits policy. Reeves was in tears. I was looking down from the press gallery and we repeatedly saw her wiping them away from her cheeks.
Parliament was already tense, but no one expected the emotional implosion that unfolded today as Chancellor Rachel Reeves was visibly reduced to tears after a brutal takedown by Reform UK's Sarah Pochin that left the Labour front bench stunned and Keir Starmer looking like a man entirely out of control of his party. In one of the most chaotic and raw political moments of the year, what began as a standard economic debate spiraled into a public humiliation for Labour as Reeves was accused, live unfiltered and mercilessly, of betraying the very people her party claims to represent. It started with a question. Calm, surgical, but venomous. Sarah Pochin stood, paper in hand, and directed her fire with the kind of precision that didn't just aim to critique, it aimed to destroy. She recited the list of broken promises: no meaningful wealth tax, watered-down green pledges, backpedaling on public sector investment, and a complete absence of clarity on inflation mitigation. Then she turned to Rachel Reeves directly.
Labour MPs, she looks absolutely miserable.
We could see Rachel, which makes the Chancellor's already difficult job even harder.
You had a chance to lead, she said, voice rising. And you let us down. The chamber went silent. Reeves tried to respond, tried to defend herself with the kind of controlled tone expected of a chancellor, but it wasn't there. Her voice cracked, and then she stopped speaking. In real time, MPs watched as she lowered her head, eyes red, face trembling. Keir Starmer, seated next to her, leaned forward as if to intervene, but didn't. He knew this was no longer containable. That single moment was enough for Pochin to unleash a second wave. She turned to Starmer himself, calling him an embarrassment, a shambles, and an anchor weighing down what used to be a movement. Every word was a slap. Every sentence landed like a headline, and across the benches the reaction was immediate. Gasps, uncomfortable shifting, and, in some cases, murmurs of agreement. "You promised integrity," Pochin continued, staring directly at the Labour leader. "But every time there's pressure, you fold. You promised working-class families a champion. Instead, you delivered a lecture and a shrug." Then she looked back at Reeves and said simply, "You let us down." The repetition, delivered with a calm finality, was more powerful than any shouted insult. The cameras didn't cut away. The moment was broadcast live, and within seconds, social media caught fire. Rachel Reeves' crying began trending immediately. Clips were everywhere. News outlets, opposition campaigns, even anonymous accounts splicing the breakdown with footage of Labour's past promises. It was brutal, and it wasn't just internet noise. Commentators across the spectrum began asking whether Reeves could even stay on as Chancellor after such a public collapse. The Prime Minister, barely needing to intervene, sat with the calm confidence of a man watching his opponents destroy themselves. Meanwhile, Starmer attempted to shift the narrative, rising to speak about the broader economic vision. But it was too late. The damage had been done. He stumbled through familiar talking points, avoiding the emotional crater that had just opened beside him. But Pochin wasn't finished. "You can recite numbers, talk about fiscal responsibility," she said, cutting across the chamber as Starmer spoke. "But where's the heart? Where's the fight? Where's the party that used to believe in something?" The Labour benches were rattled. You could see it in the eyes of backbenchers who no longer clapped out of loyalty, but out of habit. The confidence was gone. The narrative was slipping. And the people watching from across the UK, those who tuned in out of curiosity or outrage, weren't seeing a party of government. They were seeing a party in crisis. Even sympathetic journalists struggled to defend it. One headline read, "Reeves crumbles as Pochin delivers career-defining rebuke." Another simply stated, "Starmer watches as Labour implodes." The Times called it a meltdown. The Guardian called it deeply uncomfortable. Right-wing outlets had a field day. Labour, weak, woke, and weeping, blared one cover before Parliament had even adjourned. And it wasn't just about optics. What Pochin exposed today wasn't merely an emotional breakdown, it was a credibility crisis. She laid bare the ideological drift of Labour's leadership. "You don't know who you're fighting for anymore," she said. And it shows. People are paying more, earning less, and you offer them spreadsheet jargon and press release slogans. Inside Labour HQ, the phones didn't stop. Donors were reportedly furious. One source claimed several were reconsidering their future support. A senior shadow cabinet member, speaking anonymously, admitted the moment was disastrous and questioned how long Reeves could continue to represent the economic platform. The public reaction wasn't much better. Voters called into radio shows expressing shock, disappointment, and in many cases, pity. "I wanted to like Reeves," one caller said. "But today just proved none of them are ready. Not her, not Starmer, none of them." As for Sarah Pochin, her name is now cemented in the political lexicon. Previously considered a firm but restrained voice in Reform UK, today she emerged as something else entirely, a disruptor, a truth-teller, and someone who just delivered a haymaker punch to Labour's front bench that may echo for months to come. By late afternoon, Labour's press office released a heavily worded statement about the toxicity of political discourse, clearly attempting to shift the narrative from collapse to victimhood, but few bought it. The footage was too raw, the questions too real, and the political cost already mounting. Back at Parliament, the whispers grew louder. Whispers about a reshuffle, whispers about a pivot, even whispers about Rachel Reeves stepping back from frontline politics. Starmer's inner circle has been thrown into disarray. What they planned as a routine week of economic briefings has now turned into damage control, morale repair, and emergency PR strategy. Yet, perhaps the most stinging moment came not from a quote or an outburst, but from the look on Starmer's face when Reeves began to cry. For the first time, it looked like he didn't know what to do. Not politically, not strategically, but as a leader. That's what stuck with everyone. Not the policies, not the data, but the collapse, the chaos, the silence, and that brief glimpse of truth that behind the slogans, the Labour machine is faltering, and its two most prominent figures just got exposed. In the coming days, there will be calls for unity, statements of resilience, attempts to pivot back to the economy, housing, and public services. But today will remain etched in the political memory. A day when the curtain slipped, when emotions erupted, when reality bit down hard on illusion. Sarah Pochin may have only taken a few minutes to speak, but she left behind a crater that may take months, if not years, for Labour to crawl out of. And in those few minutes, she revealed the fragility behind the facade. The tears weren't just Reeves. They were symbolic of an entire party cracking under pressure. And as the House emptied out, one phrase echoed through the corridors. They let us down. Whether it came from Pochin, from the public, or from within Labour itself, no one could deny it anymore.